Everybody's a winner. But not really.
Is.
Stop it. You guys are terrible.
You'll never work in this industry again.
Hello and welcome to the Quackast. This is Quackast number 394. I'm Ozone Ocean and with me is Baines.
Hello.
Tance.
Hello.
And Pitsy. Hi, Pit.
Hi.
So we're going to be talking about nostalgia. Is it creative fuel or is it hold you back? You know, whatever. Nostalgia is something that you can really make things out of. It's cool. So yeah, we're going to be talking about nostalgia. But before we get into that, I've got to bring up the comic that's featured, the featured comic.
It has been a long time.
It was Quai. Quai did it.
A comic that is featured.
Yes. And the featured comic this week was the Drunk Duck Awards that Quai did. Okay, so take it away, Quai, with the awards.
Hello, this is Quai Daigakusen, and the feature I've selected for this week is the Drunk Duck Awards 2018 by Nicia, and it is rated E for everyone. You are invited to the 2018 Drunk Duck Awards. This year's theme is modeled after movie award shows, and several comic creators have assembled marvelous movie posters that look riveting and professional. This year's show is brought to you by our host Nicia, along with the assistance of a panel of judges, several on-site volunteers, and viewers like you. Award presentations will begin during the week of October 8th, so please enjoy perusing the movie poster themed for your consideration pages that have been lovingly put together. Grab your fanciest ball gown or tuxedo, invitation ticket, and popcorn, and attend the Drunk Duck Awards 2018 by Nicia, rated E.
And that was the awards. Thanks for that, Kawaii. Okay, so now we have the featured music that Gummallis has given us, and this week Gummallis has given us the theme to this little comic that he has given us the theme to. What is it? It was Metal Ice Cream. Oh God, yeah. I saw a couple of pages of this. It reminds me of Appleseed or Ghost in the Shell, just in the style that he used, not the theme or anything. So take it away, Gummallis, with the music. It is This is the sound of a spaceship, full of mysterious, robotic, metallic, clunky, and compelling dance beats. Grind your gears, shake that chunky metal body till it rattles. Okay, Gummallis, give us the theme to Metal Ice Cream. And that was our music. Thank you very much for that, Gummallis. Metal Ice Cream. Take a bite out of that cold goodness. All right, so nostalgia. All right. this is something that I sort of, was thinking about for a while. It's something you often mine in creative projects in order to get some goodness. But there's this film, what's it called? Steven Spielberg film, Ready Player One. Yeah, so this is a film all about nostalgia, all about it. So it's a good jumping off point. So people are the product of their influences, right? For a lot of us, the strongest influences happen when we're growing up and learning about the world for the first time. We're sort of the world and all the things in it for the first time. And as you get older, the things you experience don't make as much of an impact, simply because your brain has already had all of its first times. And it's already learned enough about the world to be fully functional and independent. Nostalgia is strongest when you harken back to those formative experiences. Not just nostalgia for films and things, but nostalgia for anything, for smells, sounds, the first time you kissed or the first time you saw something or heard something. So many little origin stories, so to speak. Art that references nostalgia can make you feel more connected to it. It can also give you a mental rush when you recall how much you love something, look forward to it, etc. It can transport you back to when you had a particular frame of mind and dwell on that. Also, things are always cooler looking back than when you are actually experiencing them, because your mind romanticizes and embellishes memories, creating an impressionist painting of them. The recent film Ready Player One, directed by Steven Spielberg, based on a book, plays on pop culture nostalgia heavily, as well as the nostalgia of formative experiences, and contrasts it with the need to live in the present. Of course, nostalgia helped sell that film and made the book a hit. Films, books, comics use nostalgia in many ways to draw an audience in. Creators can use it to make themselves get enthused for work. So you're not just using nostalgia to sell the thing. You use nostalgia to give yourself creative fuel in order to work on it, because nostalgia helps in all sorts of ways. So yeah, that's the thing we're going to be talking about, as well as our own nostalgia, because everyone loves nostalgia. I don't know. Often people...
I used to love nostalgia so much.
Yeah, remember the days.
Remember nostalgia?
I think people often talk about nostalgia in a negative light. You often get these people saying, "Oh God, nostalgia! Oh, not another nostalgia thing." But it's endemic to everything. So I think that's being a little wanky, because nostalgia is something that it's not just something that you look dreamy-eyed on and you talk about these formative experiences that no one else can experience, just you. Nostalgia is something that on some levels keeps us all connected, because we all had formative experiences, and they're all roughly, equally relatable in some ways. We all had first times. And so we all had that. We all have. We didn't all watch, say, The Goonies or Empire Strikes Back or Indiana Jones or something like that, but a lot of us did, and so we can sort of have that as a relatable experience. We can talk about that. We can talk about when we first saw it and how much we enjoyed it and stuff like that, and that can sort of be a uniting kind of thing. So nostalgia is not just like people like to characterize it as an onanist experience, like a self pleasuring kind of thing. It's not. It's a kind of way of making us more connected to each other. So it can be more than just an individual thing.
Yeah, and it's always also connected in the era, like your cohort that you are growing up in, and all the social norms and scripts, so to speak, that go with that. For example, we have some kind of emotional reaction to the sound of the modem connecting, through the analog.
Yeah.
Yes. Oh my
Oh.
god.
And going like that sort of thing.
Shabong, shabong.
Oh, I love
Exactly.
that.
And always feeling that you are hogging up the line and you can't
Don't
stay
pick up the phone.
hogging forever. Yeah, that sort of thing. So we relate to that. Someone that was born, I don't know, in the 2000s will not.
Yeah.
They will not even know what the sound is. So there will be a disconnect. And or like shoving your pencil through the tape and swinging it around to rewind
Right.
it,
Yeah.
things like that. This like immediately they make you grin and remember and just recall, just the act of recalling something that was super frustrating at the time.
Mm-hmm.
Especially if the pencil wasn't properly hexagonal and you couldn't do the work.
Yeah.
Yeah, it didn't have a
that's
good grip and the thing just spun around, slipped and all that kind of stuff.
And the
Exactly.
labor of dialing a rotary dial phone.
Yes. And pushing it to
Zero.
go back into position with your finger, like you didn't pull your finger back from the rotary phone. You just
Right.
did this oscillation with your finger. The concept of going out of the house and not having a mobile phone with you, like people just expected you to be certain places without checking in. It was just not a thing.
Very different, man.
And if you were teeing up, it was actually easier to tee up, not all the time, but if you had like meetings and you were going to meet friends, because you'd know you'd have to be there. You couldn't run late, and you couldn't just sort of like show up anywhere. You had to like be at a landmark at a certain time or a place. So people had to be a bit more punctual. Yeah. Punctional. What is punctional? Idiot. Yeah, so
punctual.
You'd have to be a little punk. You have to be there on time. Yes.
You have to be a punk.
A punk.
Yeah.
A punkin.
I do wonder, like those things obviously people aren't going to remember that, but even the entertainment thing you were talking about, Oz, and we have somewhat of a shared, I mean, we're from all over the world.
Yeah.
We have somewhat of a shared culture, I guess, or whatever of entertainment, and there's some stuff we don't know about each other growing up. But I wonder what it's going to be like now with people growing up in the age of the internet, where like some of these internet personalities are, hugely popular. A lot of people are watching them. I don't know if it's enough people though for them to have kids. I mean, like for them to have a shared experience in the future. Is it going to be completely fractured?
Or also consider too, I think you bring up our shared experiences through media and stuff like that and how it's very much internet based right now. And I think what's come with that is what's popular or who is popular changes much more quickly. And it'll be interesting to see how that affects people's nostalgia.
That's right. Yeah.
Yeah. Who are they going to connect to? Maybe
will they be cashing in on?
Ben said, but fractured across even maybe someone's like a 15-year-old and a 14-year-old will have totally different people who they latched onto,
right?
Because like Pitt says, it changes so much. Whereas back in like days past, a whole a 5-year kind of gap between people would mean nothing because everybody would be into the same thing. It didn't really matter,
right? Yeah.
I don't know. Maybe that's totally ridiculous, but like Pitt says, that does change. PewDiePie and people like that, and who's that? The guy in the suicide forest.
Oh, that's who I was thinking of. Yeah, Logan Paul. It was millions. He has millions of people watching him. I never heard of him until the scandal.
Same.
But
But have you already forgotten about him until now? I mean, you see how quick that is. Like,
Yeah.
he's still popular now amongst the people who watch him. He's still, gets the views and stuff like that. But at the same time, it's not like when we were growing up and like, like everywhere would be, New Kids on the Block or back thing. There'd be one big name overall, and then there'd be maybe a secondary big name or a third.
Mm.
No, it's much more crowded now than that. I think it's much easier to forget that's popular now.
And I think that also being popular and the capacity of becoming popular is far more accessible, or at least offers the illusion of it being more accessible. You can have like kids pretty realistically, I would say, realistically in the sense that sorry, my program just crashed.
Oh no.
I held it in though. Anyway, so what I was saying is that they can really expect that they have a shot at growing a following, even a modest one for this era, in the sense that they can have like 1,000, 2,000 followers on YouTube without pretty much doing anything remarkable, as was the norm in our cohorts. Like you had to be greenlit by a lot of
gatekeepers.
Yes, and that was very, very hard to achieve. So there's that.
Yeah, it's a different experience. Yeah, but I mean, we are. It's not like these people are growing up with a different experience to us totally, because we're still alive, we're still experiencing it as well, and we're still eating up pop culture the same as we did when we were younger. Because I think we sort of we extend our active pop culture like absorption. I think we still like absorbing it as just as well, not just as much as we did when we were younger, but still we're still eating it up quite a lot. I mean, Pitt, some of these names. You used to watch some of these guys. So, and
I'm aware. Aware of them.
Aware. So, and we can become famous
I am
too.
aware of you.
I mean, it's not like that is only available to like children. That's something that is for us as well. But yeah, when we were growing up, things were different. Yeah, so I don't know where I'm going with that. It's just
no, they were though.
True,
they were different. Even if you think back to stark divide between what entertainment is meant for boys and what's meant for girls, that has changed a lot now as well. The beauty gurus, for example, on YouTube. You get a lot of guys now that put on makeup and show you how to put on makeup and do a damn fine job of it, or like, yeah, there's all sorts of stuff out there, and
I need that for the zit on my nose. I'll have to watch some tutorials.
Yeah, there you
go. Okay, so yeah, so the way things are structured has changed. So people will be having a slightly different kind of nostalgia, of course, but in a like Tant says, like everybody says, like in a different mode, because there's so much of it. It's so fractured. Experiences aren't as general, but they still are in a way. I mean, there's the big names who have all the promotion through various means that everyone will know. I don't know, people like Justin Bieber, or he is like old hat now, but a lot of people grew up with him.
Sure.
Yeah,
people are going to have that attachment to him, definitely.
Mm-hmm.
And something that strikes me suddenly is because I've been preoccupied of thinking of this in terms of celebrities. But you know what we haven't mentioned yet that's a big cultural phenomenon and that I think will carry a lot of nostalgia that already does is memes. I mean,
Right.
and those again are starting to be so mass produced now that like, there's new ones like every week that they really don't really matter anymore. But like back in the day, you had your big stupid memes that were like everywhere and yet somehow like spoke for the culture. And so people like us will like look back at that and see those things and be like, oh, I remember that like back when the internet was like young and fresh and stupid and everybody was willing to try anything, and like
yeah, you can like, who remembers some of the old memes? There are some memes that are already into nostalgia, like Dancing Baby is one of the early ones, and that was shit back then.
Yeah.
But like the manatee meme, wasn't a manatee
Or even
or a seal?
even Slenderman.
The one with
I
the
don't know if
bucket?
that qualifies, but
Yeah,
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, it will. Yeah. Yeah, you're right. There are a few, and they will be iconic. That will be a big, big thing.
Something that, I mean, this is just a little side note, but they tried to make a Slender Man movie. I didn't see it. Apparently nobody
They
saw it.
did.
And apparently it's
Everyone
horrible.
there.
Yeah, that's what I wanted.
Terrible things about it.
So it just doesn't belong. I mean, my take is that it doesn't really on Slender. It exists in its best form as a series of pictures and little snatches of stories, and it's an invention that really works in that medium. In a movie, even a good movie would never be as good as what it is online.
Because it's
As
an
the
urban
last
legend, most and foremost. It's something that emerges when you're in a situation that's already creepy. It's almost like a campfire story. That's what creepypastas are in effect now. They're just modern internet campfire stories. And there's something so nostalgic in that has now been interpreted for the internet, which is really amazing if you think about it. This old format of telling stories around a campfire, they're there whenever you need. It's amazing. And they're within its own, the subculture within its own. And it gets super cringy. Oh my God, it does. But it's amazing that it can exist. And of course it's going to exist because the internet is a public forum and people are going to always tell stories,
Mm-hmm.
yeah.
Yep.
Oh, definitely. Well, speaking of films, now films are something that are mining nostalgia in maybe a crappy way now. They really are a bit overdoing it. But so we've got the new Star Wars films, of course, who just work heavily on nostalgia, and we could criticize them about that, not just cynically mining the nostalgia dollar and not coming up with anything new. But they actually work pretty well. Like the Star Wars ones, Solo, which didn't really do very well at the box office. But I think that will, in years to come, that will become one of those more occult kind of films, because it has a lot of I know it.
Personally, I don't think that the problem with Star Wars is the nostalgia, and I don't think it's a problem to want to mine the nostalgia in a sense. The thing is that there is a way to do good nostalgia and a way to do very bad nostalgia.
Tell.
Yes, gather up, listen to the special.
Sage.
But the idea is that if you want to be tapping into a nostalgic thing, you have to keep the pulse of that thing going, like bring it back to life and manage to have the flavor that people will be looking for in the nostalgia. Because if you give them an empty shell without this flavor that people will be looking for when they go to see something nostalgic, they are going to be frustrated and they are going to shut down.
Yeah.
Which is a big problem with a lot of things that try to tap into the nostalgia without putting in the effort, putting in the love that would go with in order to bring something alive as it used to be, in a sense. Even if it's with a modern spin, the modern spin is not going to be a problem if you keep the feel of it alive. It might even excite people even more. And I think that Star Wars completely missed that particular bit.
Heck yeah, definitely.
And that's why people are angry more than anything else.
Oh, are you talking about The Last Jedi or something like that?
I'm talking mostly about, The Last Jedi, but not only The Last Jedi. There was something off. That's the thing. Like, it felt like a kid who has seen something cool and put on a costume but doesn't know what that costume stands for.
All right.
So
that's well put. Yeah.
So they are prancing about, like sort of like a monkey that puts on the peacock's feathers, but it's not a peacock. Sort of like like this.
Yeah.
Okay.
And you see that it's a monkey with a peacock feather. It's not a peacock. It's as simple as that.
Yeah.
So,
yeah.
Well, actually, that's a good analogy, but I felt like in the Solo film, they did do it a bit better in that, even though it had a lot of like faults, it did manage a little bit better at making a real Star Wars film in that they got the aesthetic of the 80s, late 70s kind of thing going. They got that down right, and they got some of the style of that kind of thing right. So they really did work in the right direction. There's still
I haven't seen it,
problems. Yeah. Well, there's still a lot of problems, like you say, and it is like that, like the monkey putting on the feathers and prancing around. There is a bit of that, but it's moving more towards in the right direction, better than, say, The Force Awakens, which had way more missteps than it should have. Yeah. But okay, Star Wars isn't the only one. We have like Guardians of the Galaxy heavily mines the nostalgia, like in the music that Star-Lord listens to, because he comes from the 80s and he listens to the stuff on cassette tape on a Walkman. So that's just pure stuff, as well as like it's a comic from then as well, so it's mining that. Well, I don't know.
Well, sort of. But I mean, that comic, who knows those characters before the movie came out?
Yeah. I mean,
that was like an unknown comic mostly.
Yeah. So it's not really mining the characters so much, but it's mining what they're into. And because that's, they're saying he comes from then. And that did it very well. It was so popular because of that, because of the music and all that kind of stuff.
Stranger Things kind of did that as well. Well, it really did that a lot. And sometimes they were a bit too heavy-handed with it. Like, it got to the point sometimes where they were like throwing out like obvious 80s references, like, because we're in the 80s, like we get it, like, okay,
stop,
And I like Stranger Things. Well, I've only seen the first season, but that kind of, it didn't really annoy me too much for a little bit, but it kind of speaks to that point of, there's a fine line between using it to set a scene and getting the attention of the peoples who connect to that kind of nostalgia, or perhaps even enticing people who may connect, because you can become nostalgic about things that you've never experienced before. But so it's that fine line between doing that and between being quirky and being like, well, you should like this thing because it's like this. And once it, because we have these references. And once again, like Stranger Things doesn't do that. Like, it would have annoyed me if Stranger Things didn't have more substance to offer besides that. Like, I liked it as a series. But if it wasn't quite so strong, then that would have been super annoying,
Actually,
Yeah, it would have been just window dressing. I mean, that's what you talk about when you, like, Stranger Things did a feeling and a vibe and specific details, too, of the 80s and also a style of 80s movies and stuff.
Spielberg.
But
stuff.
it's not... Yeah, right. But it's not that kind of more cynical version of, recognition. People are, like, tapping into that powerful nostalgic thing because we'll get people into the theater, we'll sell tickets this way with the name, it's not a feeling like Stranger Things, it's an actual, it's Star Wars again, it's those same characters coming back, and stuff like that is way more difficult. First of all, even doing it well is difficult because of Oz talked about in the beginning, like the nostalgia filter, where things are better in your memory probably than they really were.
You romanticize it and crave it.
Yeah. So you have an uphill battle there. But then if you're not, if there's a laziness attached, and it's just kind of a cash grab as your motivation, you're in trouble. And we're in trouble as an audience.
Yes. Speaking of the thing that it does exactly what Pitt says, you sort of said it as a joke. Yeah, we're the 80s. Have you watched BoJack Horseman?
Yeah,
no.
Great show.
Yeah, well, a lot of people are into that. I was always thinking, oh god, another adult cartoon, whatever. Anyway, I just started watching it, and it is actually good. And they have a lot of flashbacks to when, because BoJack. Okay, the story is BoJack used to be a TV sitcom star, like Charles in Charge sort of thing. One of those kind of, so like a family kind of dad kind of character in charge of some kids. And he got really popular.
Who's the boss? Oh, yeah, Charles in Charge. Yeah, never mind. Sorry.
Got really popular in the 80s or the early 90s. And now he's just this washed up celeb, and he's coasting on that old stardom, and he's in the, the Hollywood machine. Anyway, so he does have like flashbacks to the 80s or to the 90s. But the funny thing is, like, he'll walk into a producer's office, and the producer says, yeah, it's 1989 now, or say, yeah, that's not a very 1988 thing to do. And they specifically reference exactly when it's meant to be. So we're doing this now because, this is what we do in 1986. So they're very open about it. And so that's a show that it is designed around that nostalgia kind of stuff, and it's completely open, and it does it well, and it mines that specifically for comedy. So yeah, you can have all sorts of approaches to that kind of thing. But yeah, as Bane says, when it's like for Star Wars or something, and they're not like openly admitting that it's all about nostalgia, they're just trying to get you in using it. It can be
I'm thinking they don't have to admit it. They just have to do the work and be aware that they are going to go under scrutiny for these nostalgic things, and be respectful enough and, dare I say, clever enough to actually not press the wrong buttons, which is not really all that hard. All you need to do for specific cohorts is to see what they like and what they feel nostalgic about, and don't touch that. Just translate it as it was on the screen and use that to build your new stuff rather than try to twist the old thing into something else that you had in mind.
Okay, all right. So
try to take away what people liked about the old thing, sort of, not have
and then
that,
then they will tend to be more open to the new stuff that you will introduce because you haven't messed with their old stuff.
Yeah. Like that. I mean, look at Next Generation, Star Trek: The Next Generation, who faced a lot of resistance when they were that show was coming out. People were like the hardcores, I guess, were going nuts. Like there was a lot of kind of outrage, or as we say in Canada, outrage from people who love Star Trek. Outrage, and ends up being an amazing show, massive, and now people are nostalgic for that show.
Yeah.
They, definitely how to do it right.
Yeah. And bringing that up the way you do, it brings up a lot of memories for me when I was a kid, although it was never, I never went out of my way to watch the show when I was a kid. You know what I mean? But I remember my parents used to put it on every night when we'd sit down and eat dinner, or whenever it was on. And it brings back
the
very
original
specific memories. No, Next Generation.
Next Gen. Yeah.
And it brings back very specific memories. And it's funny because when I see references to that Star Trek, even though it wasn't something directed at me, and it's not something that I directly consumed, it still holds a lot of nostalgic impact for me because as a nostalgic device, it connects me back to memories, And I think that's the thing. Like when we have these nostalgic things, we're not just like, oh, this thing, this nostalgic item is an island in itself. No, it's connected to the things that you were doing at the time, or the things you smelt or that were going on. Like when you were talking about winding the tape up with the pencil, I remember being 7 years old and being up in my room that I thought was haunted and drawing dinosaurs on the chalkboard, listening to the Styx tape that my dad burned for me, and it would stop and I would take it out and I'd wind it up and I'd shove it back in and look at my fish, in the fish tank. And so I remember it's just it all connects, and that's how
it works.
It is strange in that it is both a vastly cultural phenomena while it's also deeply personal.
Mm-hmm.
Interesting.
So imagine if instead, if they bring back that era and instead of having a guy wind the tape back like this with a pencil, they sort of do it in a way that would be super alien. I don't know. For example, I can't even imagine a way that would be almost anachronistic in a sense, they put it in a special device that rewinds them immediately, or I don't know what. You would feel, I would feel frustrated because immediately it could kick in this emotional, that's not how it was done. It throws you out of whatever it is you're watching at the time. Yeah, and it also frustrates you. So you get, in one stroke, two things that you don't want in an audience, basically. So, that's why you should respect nostalgia. Some elements of it.
Or play,
you've got
if you're going to try to tap into it, you definitely should.
Got something set in the 80s and you play 90s music.
That
would shit me so much. Say if you were going, this was metal music back in the 80s, and they play some crappy thing from the 90s, and you just think, what the fuck? That would just be bad.
Yeah, that's also misrepresentation and the feeling that the new people that are watching this are going to believe that was it, and that feels even worse.
That would be just the worst thing you could possibly do.
Now we're talking
actually,
about
the stuff gets sort of taken and adapted and repeated, so those false things can actually have legs.
And there is this one thing, for example, and that I understand why they did it and everything, but it's still sort of gets under my skin a little bit. I remember going in to watch Hercules when Disney had released it.
Oh, right.
And aside the fact that it's a gross, it's it's like the barbarians went into this temple and they put posters all over it and said, "This is your culture." So this was the one thing. But the other thing was that the way they represented, there was no Greek element in it really. I mean, aside the names, and not even all of the names, they were so westernized and they were so alien that it was pretty much a story that could take place in any sort of fantastic setting, and I couldn't connect with it as someone going to see how my culture is being represented, or my nostalgia learning about these things at school.
Oh.
It was completely alien. In order to enjoy the movie, I had to shut off the entire thing that I went into this movie anticipating and just see it as something else. Like, this is not it.
Yeah.
I'm not going to see mythology. I'm not going to get this feeling, oh my God, my old stories that I grew up with are being animated and I can, connect with them and stuff. Yeah. And that can be very jarring. I suspect that the reason why Hercules wasn't very successful is because they didn't actually respect the core of the thing. Like, they could have made it into a modern version of, like, if they were such a genius team that could put the modern Greeks be with the ancient Greek setting and just create something that was like modern westernized Greece upon a backdrop of the ancient one, I would probably enjoy it and be very, very impressed.
Well, he did the same thing with Hunchback of Notre Dame too. I think it's very much a product of that era of Disney. It was just kind of, everything was just had this kind of gross mass produced, like it didn't know which way it wanted to go really. And a lot of it's, I mean, Pocahontas suffered, and so did Hunchback of Notre Dame, so did Hercules. I mean, I'm a classics major, so I'm used to saying Heracles, so I feel like every time I'm sinning. But Greek classics, not that Roman ripoff bullshit. But
exactly.
But yeah, that was not a good time for Disney, and I wouldn't mind perhaps seeing that remade sometime. But it wouldn't have to be a Disney remake. It just could be, I don't know. We could say that, but there have been other attempts to release the story of Heracles in a cinematic form with varying degrees of success. But I don't know.
Yeah, but
I don't think at the time that they were focusing on. Sorry, I'm just gonna say, considering those other movies that I mentioned, I don't think at the time they were trying to represent the stories that those cultures loved. Because once again, like bring up the Hunchback of Notre Dame and how that was utterly fucking butchered. There's no French person that's going to look at that and be like, oh, that's, the romantic story, not romantic story, but the tragic story of the, you fucking see, of the hunchback and the, all that kind of stuff. So
yeah, definitely. And the thing is that, and that's one last little gripe, because, Greeks love to gripe about stuff, is that when Mulan came out, although the film managed to still piece of the Chinese, because there were a lot of elements from also Japanese culture in it and Korean culture in it, not 100% Chinese culture, but still, to me, by comparison, it felt so much more authentic and respectful to the source material compared to Las Vegas Herc.
Las Vegas Herc, yeah.
That I felt so bitter. Like, why are you doing this?
You didn't even give him a beard.
Well, yeah, okay. They didn't have to give him a beard because theoretically, like when he was a young guy. Young guys aren't necessarily depicted with beards because they are young in ancient iconography, I suppose.
Achilles
But
never
yeah.
had a beard.
Hercules. He's always depicted.
No,
with
Achilles.
Achilles. I thought I was saying
Oh,
Hercules.
yeah.
Achilles. No,
He was-
Achilles is like a pretty boy, but Hercules is usually, or Heracles is usually like big wrestler body in the statues, man's man sort of thing. Not a hipster beard.
Yeah.
He's-
No, you're
He's a
right. He
monster.
usually does look kind of burly, but at the same time, like, I don't know. Maybe it doesn't completely shatter the image. I don't know. I think there were bigger fish to fry that
The
wasn't
beard.
something that was quite the worry.
Yeah, the beard wasn't going to be a problem, really. Like,
Oh,
okay.
jeez. Yeah,
There's
well, your point about nostalgia, that going into something expecting your nostalgia itch to be scratched, and that's what you really want to have, and just being betrayed by that is a very important thing, because that can destroy creative work. That's one of the small things that messed up the Star Wars prequels, the fact that they did not manage to scratch the nostalgia itch at all, quite apart from the fact that they were really boring, but and badly made. But yeah, so that was a fault when you expect that to be something that's going to be there, and it's absolutely not. That can be a real problem. Like as well for the Indiana Jones films, I think, for people as well. You go into those expecting your nostalgia itch to be scratched because you enjoyed the early ones so much, and they're very iconic. And when you see that betrayed or not, that nostalgia not being respected, that spoils it even more for you than maybe the story not being so great. So yeah, that can be a real problem. Just getting away from.
And I have to say
go on.
just one more thing. The worst thing that you can do after that is, after you have failed to do the whole nostalgia stint and number, you say, "Oh, it's not made for you," the one that's supposed to have the nostalgia.
Yeah, right. Yeah,
Not for
that's
you.
crazy.
It's for the new people that know nothing about it.
Yeah, that know nothing and don't give a shit about it. Yeah, it's for them.
Yeah.
We brought all these
swear.
65-year-old heroes into the movie and marketed them to you, but it's not for you.
Yeah, that's
This
just
is for
so
Racist,
for the new audience.
like
racist or blip east, whatever at your
Yeah, all you
word of choice.
Yeah.
I've
That's
seen
terrible.
that justification for the prequels. People say, "Oh, it's not for you. It's like it's for the kids. Don't you remember? Like Star Wars was originally a kids film." No, you don't know anything if you think Star Wars was originally a kids film. There were people of all ages going to see that, and they loved it. And the prequels were not for kids. They had the kid element, which was the stupid Anakin child, but then they had dense politics and stuff that kids don't give two craps about.
Yeah.
What
Well, they're
kind
doing
of-
the same thing now, man, with the Disney Star Wars. They're doing like
Yeah,
exactly
and
the same
if it
thing.
was for kids, like if the prequels were for kids, why was Anakin's mother so obviously gang raped by I don't know how many people that
Right.
were
Oh my
consequently
God,
massacred?
that's right. Yeah.
I
Like-
never
And why did
remember
it have to
that.
happen on screen? That's why.
Exactly.
What are you talking about? Oh my
Yeah.
God. Oh jeez.
Yeah,
Oh,
a family movie, a family
Yeah.
picture.
It's about family.
jeez.
But yeah, they're really doing the same thing with the new movies, man. Like the same kind of playbook. honestly, I don't like the prequels, but I didn't feel like, I don't know if we're getting too late in the podcast, and I don't know exactly what point I'm making, but maybe I'm even wrong about this, but the prequels didn't seem to be selling nostalgia in the same way that the new ones are.
No,
I think George Lucas was trying to do something, even though it was a prequel, like he was trying to do something. He was trying to tell a new story and do different things. Even in a prequel, he purposely didn't recapture the look and the feel of the original Star Wars trilogy.
Okay.
Which is a very strange choice for a prequel.
Yeah.
But it's like
But
20 years ago, how did it look this different?
Question, or, when you do have something that does become, even after the fact, a cultural icon that people look back to in terms of nostalgia, I mean, does it stop being yours? Do you stop having creative right over it? Not officially, of course, but I mean, like,
talking about
can you change it? Can you change it?
Yeah.
Without considering the audience that you already have.
Well, I think you've obviously you can, but if you want it to sell, if you want it to be successful, then you have to respect that audience. Yeah. And if you don't respect them, then your work is just going to fail.
Yeah, be as artsy as you want and creative freedom all you want, but this is business. Like, you're not going to deny that he wants to sell toys, and they want to sell toys and make a pile of money and all this stuff. That's what they care about, So it's
you do have to respect the fact that it's not yours anymore, even though it like legally or whatever, you own the copyright, but you're not going to make any money off that creative work. Well, you're going to make money, but not as much as you like.
I think,
in an ongoing way. Yeah.
I think like you should ask yourself, why do I want to uproot absolutely everything that I have built in this particular setting, rather than creating something new? Because if there is a reason, an actual creative reason that you want to do it, then it is also going to be organic to that particular cosmos, because you are the creator and you have this vision that you want to take the entire work towards, but it's going to be organic. It's going to be within the confines of that particular setting, let's say. So if you respect the rules that have been preset before you break them, then I don't think anyone is going to have a problem with that at all. Because it's going to be something new.
Yeah.
Yeah. There was a series, I don't know if you guys watched Bates Motel. It's a prequel to Psycho.
No, I was curious about that. Is it any good?
It's really good. Oh yeah, it's really good, really good.
Okay.
Not selling nostalgia, in my opinion. I mean, maybe selling like brand recognition, because everyone knows Psycho and the basics of it. But it wasn't selling nostalgia. It wasn't set in the 50s, preparing for a Psycho movie to happen in 1960 like it did. It was updated, themes from the movie were there. They were faithful to the character, like sort of the fundamentals of the character. They didn't make him wacky, although they expanded on the world, and the mother, who you never see in Psycho, is expanded on. You see what she was like, and it was excellent, and sort of maybe playing into some nostalgia. Like, I was definitely curious to see it because it was Norman Bates and all that stuff, because it was Psycho, I mean, but not manipulating. I mean, maybe, I mean, like I said, there was, but they were doing something new. They were doing a story.
Yeah. Like, it felt like a legitimate attempt at.
Totally. Yeah.
Maybe
a good one. I recommend it. It's a good show. Yeah.
And maybe that's something to consider when you are bringing back something that's nostalgic. is to repackage it in a new kind of format, because Psycho was obviously a movie, but Bates Motel as a series, it kind of tips you off that it has to be structured differently. This is going to be different in some way.
That's true.
But yet it kept the important things the same, like you said. Like, it didn't betray the character of Norman Bates, you know?
Right. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, and those themes, like right from the first episode, the themes of Psycho are there. It's like it doesn't feel like the movie, maybe. I don't know. I'm not a cinematographer or anything, so I don't know. Maybe it kind of fits, but I don't think necessarily they're copying camera styles. But I mean, maybe they're doing a suspense show, a suspense thriller.
Yeah,
that was the genre they stayed in. They stayed with Norman Bates's character. A younger version, what those character traits might have been. The themes of the movie are there in the show with death and cops and beings and secrets, and being crazy and all that kind of stuff. Like they do
Mama's
it all.
Boys.
Like Mama's Boys. Yeah, exactly. The mother-son relationship is central to the show. They didn't uproot everything. They did it brilliantly well. I could add that along to the Thing, that remake. When everyone says like, "What's like a good remake?" The Thing, and then they don't know what else to say. You could call Bates Motel a remake. It's not technically, but I mean, it's a very successful restoration.
Yeah, there's a lot of different ways of approaching the nostalgia remake things, or say, all right, the Brady Bunch movie. They did that as a comedy because you couldn't approach that as a serious thing. I mean, they tried and it was a failure. So a comedy version that worked really well.
That was great.
21
Actually, it was
Jump
surprisingly
Street,
good.
they sort of did the same thing.
Mm-hmm.
So sometimes you do have to change it a little bit, and it's great that you bring this up, because we can actually go back to Psycho with this example, because there was a Psycho remake.
Oh yeah, shot for shot,
and it was like,
that's right, a shot for shot.
Tried to be the same, and it neutered it, man. Like, there was no reason for it to exist. Like, the actors sucked, and like, there wasn't any reason for it. You have the original.
Yeah.
So you can watch it anytime. Yeah.
Same.
Oh,
thing.
and that's like have you seen the upcoming Mary Poppins?
No.
Oh yeah, the trailer. Yeah.
I have seen the trailer.
I'll admit, I got nostalgic there. I got excited when you see Dick Van Dyke.
Yeah.
That's the thing. That's the thing. And they are not remaking. They are not remaking Mary Poppins. You're not going to see the same story, because now the kids are all grown up, and I suspect they are going to go down the approach that Hook got with Robin Williams, with grown up child character that now has to get back in touch with their young side or young self or whatever, and learn some new things, blah blah blah. But,
underrated movie, in my opinion.
Yeah,
anyway,
I absolutely love that one.
I like it a lot. Yeah. I don't know why it's so hated, but yeah.
Is it hated? Well,
it is, apparently. Yeah.
Oh, I didn't know that. Anyway.
Yeah, so I hear. Anyway.
But yeah, no, I really liked it, and I think that it was very faithful to the style of Peter Pan from the book, more than the Disney version. If anyone has read the book. So anyway, and seeing, like, starting when the trailer starts in Mary Poppins, and you see, the clouds and everything, and you see the same road with the mansions and everything, immediately you get a smile on your face, like, oh, I remember this and everything. And they seem to be trying very, very hard to tap upon it in the right manner. Although the lady playing Mary Poppins, she has a tough mission, and I'm not sure if she will manage it. But it's a sincere attempt. That's what I'm saying.
Okay. Yeah, well, there are a lot of different examples we can bring up that that brought something new. The Addams Family was an iconic TV series. It's a masterpiece. It was so original and new, and just approached a family in a completely different way to what normally you'd get on TV series. All the way, basically there wasn't anyone like even the Munsters, which was the sort of copy. There was no family that was like that even into the 90s. So that was such an original thing. And they did a movie version, of course, with Angelica Houston and Raul Julia. And weirdly enough, that has become known as the Addams Family to a lot of people, and they don't even really know the TV series. So when they'll talk about, this iconic kind of like love story between these two weirdos, and they bring up like pictures from the bloody movies, which I think is just totally weird. So the movies have replaced the fantastic TV series in people's minds, and that's all they really relate to. So you can have that it becomes the new representative.
The movie was very, very faithful to the film of the series.
Yeah,
it was very faithful, and in the same time, they did spin it a little differently, but within the limits of what it was to have the Addams Family. Like the elements, the basic elements that made the Addams Family what it was, were all there, and they were not touched upon. They were there.
Well, definitely the characters, like they were true.
Funnily enough, I think the movie was
a little darker, a little edgier, but not too much.
The movie was more true to the original source material, the comic that was based on, I think, because even
the
like
comic was more dark.
Say Gomez Adams was actually played by Raul Julia, so a real kind of a man who is Latin descent. Like the character was meant to be slightly Latin, and even those kind of things that the TV series didn't do. That was Sean Astin playing that character, so it's actually more true to the original source material. Love Sean.
I didn't know that they had that.
John Astin, I think it was.
John Astin? Yeah. You're right.
Yeah. Sean Astin is a hobbit.
Exactly. He's
one of them.
Sam Gamgee. Yeah. You're right. Yeah. It was. So in a lot of different ways, and because the TV series became its own thing. But see, that's an interesting aspect of it. But like the TV series, really made it its own because it was so iconic. What was I going to say? Something else in the same vein as that. It doesn't matter. There are a lot of things that have, Oh yeah, Doctor Who. Now this is an interesting thing. Okay, so Doctor Who was a massive thing for a whole cohort of people growing up in from the 50s to the 60s, 70s, the 80s. Kids grew up with that for decades, even into the 90s, because that was so long. And then it stopped. It was dead. Doctor Who was no more. It came back again because of the nostalgia of the creators, and it's garnered a whole new following. And, it's being a nostalgic memory for people, even new generations of people. Like for me, I won't go and watch the new Doctor Who because I'm stuck in my nostalgic memories of the ones from the 80s and the 70s, which I grew up with and I love. So I don't have any connection or even want to have any connection with the newer versions because I've formed my nostalgic connections with those things, and it will dilute them and spoil them to look at the new ones. For me,
so you're a sexist man baby, then, is what you're saying.
Exactly. A total misogynist, and stuck in the past and all this. Yes, precisely. But yeah, I mean,
you're a basement dweller.
Yes. But I see Tom Baker as the character, and that is my nostalgic fuel. And
Yeah, that's my doctor too.
I love that. So yeah, I
Yeah.
don't care about any doctor that's not Tom Baker. So you can have that. You know, you can form a connection with something, and you don't care about like future iterations of it because you have that strong connection, which is fine. You don't need to stay up to date with your things that you love.
No, you can like whatever you want to like. Yeah, totally. I just saw an interview with the guy who created Saturday Night Live, Lorne Michaels, and he was talking about how different casts and different iterations of the show were liked by different people. And he said you can tell when someone was in high school when they tell you which iteration of SNL they liked. It's like whenever you were in high school, that's what you like, you know, because that's the demographic of that show. That's the audience of that show, I guess. You know,
Wayne's
I grew up
World.
in the Chris Farley and David Spade era.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. I was Chevy Chase and Dan Aykroyd.
Oh, so you're slightly older than I am.
I'm a few decades older. Yeah.
Yeah, you can't stand that Bill Murray guy replacing your Chevy Chase.
Oh, that new kid, Bill Murray. What is up?
What's gonna happen to him? Wow, he'll not go anywhere. Loser.
So, Eddie, do we have more time? Any you guys use nostalgia in your comics or tap into it in any way?
Oh, hell yeah.
Yeah.
Hell yeah. Yeah. I mean, well, Putrid Meat is all about, not all about, but I mean, it's thrash metal and post-apocalyptic bullshit. Like I drew heavily on like the 1980s shit that I was inspired, but it's a different kind of 1980s than you see a lot of people bringing up today. Like a subculture of the 1980s, you know what I mean? And I did it at a time when it wasn't popular. And I appreciate that it wasn't popular because I feel like it's, you know, Putrid Meat is very much its own thing because of that.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, you're not rehashing anything that is like popular, and it is going to like scratch a nostalgic itch for a majority of people. It's only going to be people that know about that specific kind of stuff or can really.
Because I was only trying to scratch my nostalgic itch. I wasn't trying to scratch anybody else's. It's mine, you know.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, important. Yeah. Like when I work on certain pages, even though I'm not referencing things and in that way, I have like moments of nostalgia that I will think of, like music I listen to or whatever, and that will give me fuel to do the page. You know, I'll think, oh my God, this really evokes this experience that I had, and that makes me think, that makes me feel so much more excited for what I'm working on. You know, like a Star-Lord listening to his cassette tapes in the Guardians of the Galaxy film. That's the kind of way that works. So yeah, that really does help. What about you guys?
Yeah. I draw a lot on the nostalgia of the thing that I have talked about so often, like the Pulp Fiction series about the kids being in Nazi-occupied Athens and being very heroic, and basically being the closest thing we have had in Greek pop culture of a kid also being 007, also being Indiana Jones, and also being like a cross between like a semi superhero sort of. So
yeah,
and last month or so, I actually found some of those Pulp Fiction books that didn't get stolen, and I have them, and it still brings a smile to my face, although they are terrible.
Great, dude. I'm so glad to hear it.
And you know, you got things like this, and this is like one of the illustrations, really bad one, but it's something that got me into wanting to know modern history of Greece, and I still drew upon it when I was making Without Moonlight. Although I took away all the fun and I left the bad stuff in, and that's what I'm saying. But
maybe Oz can take a screenshot of that or something, because nobody can see that. And on a subject of nostalgia, it could be a nice little thing to add on in the post when he makes it.
Oh shit.
someone take it.
After the cast.
Hold it up. Hold it up.
Post casto.
Hold it up.
Hold it up.
Okay, I'm holding.
Yeah. Okay, it's gonna be super blurry, but yeah,
Jimmy.
that should work. Thank you. Cool.
I don't think anyone is
To
going
do
to
it.
read Greek anyway, so it's fine.
No, but just to look at the picture, because you were referencing a picture. Anyway, go on.
Yeah. It's nice looking art in there. too.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, it definitely came from there and from all the archetypical characters. And even as I'm still making it, there are some elements in it that stem directly from me growing up with these pulp fiction books and all these stories and the feel of these stories. Like, it's just the feel that transitioned into Without Moonlight, this feeling of drab desperation and this single hope of something changing, because some people are too crazy to take the oppression, and that's the only thing that has transitioned since then. But yeah, still makes me smile even now.
Yeah, that's the important thing. It's stuff that makes you smile, and it doesn't have to be represented in the work necessarily. As long as it gives you fuel and energy, it can be the most kind of it's gold. It's mining gold. It really does help you, and it energizes you. It's fuel, even if nobody else can see. Did anyone else watch Ready Player One?
No.
No one. Oh my god, this film really does. It's almost like it's a comment on people's love of nostalgia, and I think it is, but it's not a very clever comment because it's a Spielberg film, and Spielberg films are. It's not that they're not clever; it's just that they're rather mass consumption films. They really are.
Yeah,
it's
definitely.
fun. But the film is done in such a way in that it's not just mining nostalgia, in the what it's showing, like just taking pop culture from everywhere. It's also mining nostalgia from the kind of films that Spielberg used to make in all sorts of ways, because it's a bunch of kids getting together to do something and to do something great, just like so many of his films. And it's also exact kind of like makeup of them as well. You've got the plucky boys and there's girls that is really interested in, and in some ways that's a bit too old fashioned in that it's more about the girls aren't as properly realized characters as the boys. We have more of the boys kind of his feelings and what he wants, rather than taking it from the girl's point of view, which is a more modern thing that we'd have. We'd have more of an equal kind of distribution between those character perspectives, but it's more on the boys' side, which is a much more older-fashioned thing. So there you've got nostalgia again. So yeah, but this is a film that really openly mines nostalgia. Like, you have people in a race or whatever, and there's people using maybe Kit from Knight Rider, or it's the General Lee or something like that. That's an example of the kind of thing that's really obvious kind of mining of nostalgia. But it was fun because of that, even though it was so obvious. And it's not obvious in that it's there's that thing, there's that thing. It's just like it's funny that they're doing it, It's deliberately obvious.
Yeah.
So I like that aspect of it, and I think this is a good film to watch if you had experienced any of that nostalgia, and even if you're not, because the characters in the film, like, it's set in the future, and there's this all this nostalgic stuff because there's people are all involved in like a worldwide video game, so you can all like put on your your virtual reality headsets, and you can be part of this big video game. It was made by this guy who was really nostalgic for his life growing up, so he included all sorts of things from the 70s and 80s and stuff like that. But the thing is, there's these kids are growing up in the late 2000s, maybe like 2030, 2040, something like that. So they haven't grown up with any of this. So in that way, it can be related to by kids and stuff who did not experience any of this nostalgic stuff from the 70s and 80s themselves, because they are just like the kids in the film who haven't either.
Right.
They're experiencing this thing for the first time. So it's clever in that way, even though it's not a clever film.
Interesting.
I'd recommend that. But I sorry, Baines, I didn't give you enough time to talk about nostalgia in your work.
I'm sorry. Yeah, I had to run out of the room there. I'll have to listen back to hear what you and Tan said. Yeah, I didn't realize I was doing a nostalgic thing, although I was just doing what I was doing when I came up with the characters, came up with the setting. I worked in a video store, so I wanted to do a thing about that. And when I started developing the thing, originally, I was only a couple years out from working in that video store. So it has become, with how much things have changed in just a few years, it's become a nostalgic thing. And this thing feels like now it's in some alternate reality, like in the 90s or something like that. That wasn't really the intention, but it kind of became that way. And Bottomless Waitress, there is the same kind of thing. It's like written in a way that's like old sitcoms. Maybe that's just the way I write. When I write horror, it's like Friday the 13th, so there's just nostalgia all up the times. It's kind of, it's there, but it's not really purposeful. And I don't think for anyone who reads this stuff, it probably is not, nostalgia will not be a draw to anyone, I don't imagine. It'll be just people who like, cliched writing and bad artwork. That's my target demographic. And sporadic update schedules. People who love that.
Yay!
Yay!
Best thing. No, I think the fact that it is set in a video store is it's just so cool.
It feels retro now. I guess so. It does.
I'm so glad you kept with that, and you didn't say, okay, we're going to update this, and we're going to sell records now because that's a new in thing.
I thought about doing that, but I don't know enough about music really. I know movies.
But yeah, that would have been the worst thing if you did that. If you said, okay, now we're just like gonna sell, like we're becoming an Apple store and selling MP3 players, man. That's
right. Yeah.
That's it.
I did think about. Well, I'm glad you like the idea that it's not, because I did think about should I make this something more timeless? Like they work in a laundromat now or something.
Oh no, that would have been bad.
You just can't. You get far enough in, it's like you just can't. It is what it is.
So
or a bookstore. But use bookstores. They're already doing a bookstore, so I can't.
Oh yeah, but you can have them doing.
She'll come for you.
She'll kill us all, or me at least.
They can do all the classic things, you do in video stores, like bored watching a movie on the bloody TV that's near the counter, not paying attention.
And the movie discussion is not, it's not really a central thing. There's usually some kind of story going on, but when they talk about movies, like the characters are nostalgic. They talk about old movies. There's a story coming up. Actually, Mr. Gunwallace wrote for me. Very generously, and it's about a nostalgia they have for these old movies and stuff like that. So I do kind of think that way, and I like nostalgia. I like all that stuff. So it's in there. It's all over the place. Not purposely, it just kind of happened.
Yeah.
That's Never mind.
What? Go ahead.
I was going to say something lewd. I don't want to anymore. It's stupid.
I'm nostalgic for the old lewd
Everything else I
Pitfuzz.
say. I know. What happened to her?
What happened? She grew up.
Jeez.
That's very sad.
Well,
It is sad.
I'm so glad we can all enjoy nostalgia in a positive way without being
Nationalistic.
criticizing, mooning it. Yeah. Oh yeah, without being nationalistic or without like going, oh my god, nostalgia. So, I like
Who
that.
does that anyway?
Oh, people do.
Yeah.
There are horrible
Okay.
people everywhere.
People that use their love for certain nostalgic items and never look at them critically. Not that you have to, but they come at you majorly aggressively with their love of the nostalgic.
Aggressive love. Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, God.
Yeah, that's another thing. For example, those Pulp Fiction books I mentioned, if you try, like when I was a kid, I inhaled those stories. I could read something like, I don't know, 100 pages in 2 hours. That's how much I could read this. Now, like I opened, like because I found them and they were not stolen, and I was so happy I opened them to read them again. It's terrible. The writing is terrible.
Yeah.
The writing is terrible. But I wouldn't want it changed. I wouldn't want it changed because I remember those lines now, and although they are terrible, they are something I really love, and I wouldn't want it to change. But again, I wouldn't defend it like, oh no, it's a masterpiece of literature. No, it's not. It's terrible.
Yeah.
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 I just love it. That's all.
Yeah.
I know what you mean. Like there have been certain things that I have been looking back at because of nostalgia and whatnot. And it's funny, as I was writing my thesis, I started binge watching old episodes of Small Wonder, and they're not good.
Oh my God.
Actually, there are some exceptions that surprised me, actually, but it was such a capsule of like nostalgia, but not like the manufactured nostalgia that we have today. It was nostalgia in the 80s of the 50s almost. And
Yeah.
you kind of get that in Small Wonder, but in a lot of those older 80s sitcoms, like they're nostalgic for the 50s. And so like the taste you're getting, it's so weird. Like it just even sit down and watch the opening, the Small Wonder sometime. And like if that was something made today, it would be made completely in mockery of the time. Like it wouldn't be something serious, but no, like it's so corny, and that's just what it was doing. Like it's so weird. It's so weird. Oh, but I loved it though, because it's just like, I don't know, it's got that special weird thing that can't be remade today, you know. And you'll hear a lot of old fogies say that about anything they're nostalgic about. It can't be remade, you know.
Yeah.
For better or for worse. So
No, it's true. They can't be remade because the cultural context is so different. So it wouldn't make sense.
Right.
That brings up, we are sort of going over time, but that brings up some interesting thing to me in that learning about the nostalgia of previous eras. So when I was little, the comics I would read were mainly these action comics. I think that's what they were called. So this like would be set in the Second World War, and you know there'd be like a bunch of British tank drivers or something like this, or Commando, that was another one. And so these are a nostalgia for the 1940s, and a lot of these things were written in the 60s or the 50s. So you sort of when reading that, you're picking up on other people's nostalgia, and you're learning more about what made them tick. Also, I had like boys' annual books. So these are the things that were written like in the like they were written in the 50s or in the 30s or whatever, but they pick up a nostalgia for the British Empire. because that's what they're sort of referencing, and so you're having nostalgia for an even earlier time, which is really, really
that's interesting.
And it helps you understand people from an early era as well and what influences them, and it gives you a better insight when you're watching movies or even talking to older people or whatever, and you can now relate to them better because you know what influenced them and what they were nostalgic about. So that can be really interesting to do that. It definitely reminds me of your Small Wonder thing.
Yeah. Well, thanks.
Yeah.
Reminds me of your Small Wonder.
There's the old pit face back again.
There you go. Yeah, she's back.
She'll make her way.
All right. Well, we are going a bit over time now, so we should wrap it up. Tance has unfortunately something happened to her. She drowned in nostalgia.
Let's wrap up our Small Wonder.
Make sure you wrap it up.
You go covered it.
Yeah.
We have completely covered it. Thank Christ. Okay.
Don't you forget about me.
Forget about me.
Jeez.
No.
God, I love that song.
Is this a nostalgia song? I was going to sing, baby, baby, don't look back. But that's an anti-nostalgia song, obviously. So, we're torn.
Oh, no.
If only this podcast had theme songs.
We have simple minds.
That's right. We are not cannibals. Whether fine or young or whatever.
All right. Well, yeah, thank you guys for being part of the Nostalgia Cast.
Thanks.
You didn't end that yet?
No. We've still been blathering.
It's a 3-hour episode. 3-hour tour.
3-hour tour. All right. See you guys. Bye-bye.
Bye.